There has been a biblical metaphor that has been wrongly used or wrongly deployed over the lives of many people I know, including me. A metaphor that is ultimately not true to life and thus has choked the life out of so many. That is the metaphor of the race. The Christian life is like a race. When I was a teenager struggling with my teenager sins, I lived and died by the race metaphor. In my imagination, any type of sin meant moving backwards. And some sins felt like walking backwards. Some sins felt like freaking sprinting backwards. It was all in the eye of the beholder, aka me. A very legalistic me. I was the worst. I was so vicious against myself. Just like beat the crap out of myself. Oh my, I was the freaking executioner of the law of Christ. So similar to the prodigal son, when I came to my senses after fulfilling my sin, I would have necessarily had to make up for all the distance that I lost. So I would have to take 100 steps forward just to break even in order to start making progress again. So it always felt like 2 steps forward, 100 steps back, which meant that I had to take now 102 steps forward just to break even and then stop moving forward. But by then, I already wanted to sin. So I took like 850 steps back, which meant that I was just killing myself. I try to be good, I promise. I'm exhausted just thinking about it. I would just run back and run forward, and then run it back, and just run it forward, and just run it forward, and then run it back, and then run it forward again. Oh, made it. No. Run it backwards again. The faith journey just felt exhausting, disheartening, hopeless, and ultimately meaningless. There was no hope. What else could I do? It was impossible not to throw the towel. Why wouldn't you? And that is not all. Question, what was the goal of the race? When would I know if I actually finished the race? What was I aiming for? What are you saying, man? Paul himself used this metaphor. The race metaphor wasn't just used by Paul. You can find this metaphor in Philippians 2, 1 Corinthians 9, Galatians 2, Galatians 5. Okay, it was mainly used by Paul. But the author of Hebrews also uses this metaphor in Hebrews 12. Okay, the author of the Hebrews is very likely Paul. Okay, it's clear that he used it, but the question is, when did he use it and why? Did he use it when referring to spiritual growth or maturity? You know why he didn't use it for that? Because it doesn't work for that. When you read the context of the passages when Paul is talking about a race, he's mainly talking about evangelism or holding on to faith because Christ was coming back. And this is something we don't talk about enough. Paul really believed that he was coming in their generation. You and I should have never happened in Paul's imagination. I am a mistake. You are a mistake. Christ should have come earlier. 2050, 2021 should never have happened. Shouldn't be a reality. In your face, Paul. In your freaking face, Paul. Didn't want me to exist, Paul. In your face. Pauline thought that Christ was coming in his generation definitely influenced all of his letters. But this is a topic for a different podcast, for a different video. Paul would have definitely understood that metaphor wasn't appropriate for spiritual growth. A race is a linear metaphor. There are only 2 directions. It's a binary metaphor. And if you're thinking about life and your growth, what does moving forward look like? What goes inside the forward motion category? And a more interesting question, what goes into the backward motion category? When I say moving backwards spiritually, what is the first thing that pops in your head? Would you put doubt? What about deconstruction? Would that definitely be moving backwards? So in this metaphor of the race, are we aiming for death? Is getting to heaven the goal of the marathon, of the race? Because if it is, in this model of the race, growth doesn't make much sense. Because you could die at the age of 8 and be with Jesus and not do much spiritual growing. Paul's finish line in the metaphor of a marathon/race made more sense. Preaching the gospel and holding on to faith all the way to the end. I hope you're old enough to see and realize that any binary metaphor for life is ultimately inappropriate. Your growth as a Christian is omnidirectional, multifaceted, complex, absolutely nuanced, and dare I say, seasonal. Different things need different things depending on season. It's not like a very repetitive thing or a predictable thing like a race would be. And in life and in spiritual growth, random things happen to you. Traumatic things happen to you. And unlike a race that you could actually restart or try again, we're sometimes marked by different experiences, and sadly we don't really get a do-over. That doesn't mean that we'll become worse people. We might actually become better people, but we will forever be different. And that is part of growth. We don't get to go back and relive anything. The manifestation of the kingdom of God, of the growth of Christ in us, and our response to it will change throughout our lives. And this is part of our faith journey, seeing what Christ and his kingdom will look like in the future. Spiritual growth is a beautiful yet complex topic. That is why I made yet another very important video talking about spiritual growth from a different vantage point. So I invite you to go and click on this one, and I'll see you over there.